We close? Yeah, I better just start if we're not. Okay, I guess we will not be Facebook Live, I guess. Okay, well, so be it. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today for the Democratic Party's response to the 2025 legislative session. It is time, folks, to take a really hard look at which party in this state truly stands for fiscal conservatism. The GOP pays a lot of lip service to this concept. When you look at actions, it is Idaho Democrats that are the true party of Idaho fiscal responsibility in the state. You just heard leadership on the other side of the aisle boast that they passed the giant permanent revenue reduction, perhaps the largest in Idaho history, while simultaneously opening the door to a voucher scheme that is likely to siphon hundreds of millions of dollars over time out of our treasury and out of the funds that we need for public schools in upcoming years. But what they did not talk about was what was sacrificed in order to accommodate this plan, which the combination of the vouchers and the tax cuts amount to giant tax cuts being delivered to the top 1% of folks in the state, and $5,000 private school tuition checks being delivered to the wealthiest folks who have their kids in private school. So these are the things that were left on the cutting room floor in order to accommodate these priorities. $15 million eliminating from the Affordable Housing Fund, despite affordable housing being the top priority that was listed by Idahoans heading into this session. $22 million cut from road and bridge repair. $25 million eliminated from energy rebates, which would have helped low-income seniors and veterans. $87 million being cut from public education, which includes millions being cut from special education, and in the aggregate about $30 million being cut from workforce training programs at Idaho's colleges. They killed incentive programs for rural physicians, despite our being 50th in America in physicians per capita. A complete failure to address $2.7 billion in needed school facility repairs. What they did was they allocated money toward the property tax fund, but none of that money, as we know historically, actually makes its way into school facilities. They are leaving property taxpayers to eat the cost of this. And they forced us ultimately into borrowing money to cover infrastructure repair. These are debts that are going to be left for our children and grandchildren to pay with a shrunken pot of revenue to cover it. This is the textbook opposite of fiscal conservatism, folks. Now, ironically, as I mentioned, according to the BSU policy survey, which we saw at the beginning of session, Idahoans' top priorities for this year were affordable housing, workforce training, and addressing our healthcare shortage. But these were some of the things that were cut first for the sacrificial funeral pyre in order to fund these other priorities. These were completely thrown under the bus. All funding for affordable housing, funding for rural physician incentives, funding for education, you name it. Fiscal conservatism is not conducted by chainsaw. It is not about recklessly cutting revenue and services with no consideration for future needs. It is certainly not about giveaways of taxpayer dollars with zero accountability, which is what we saw with House Bill 93, vouchers. We stand for true fiscal conservatism, being careful and prudent with taxpayer dollars, demanding accountability, and making sure we are responsibly budgeting to meet the needs of the people we serve, now and in the future, for public education, roads, fire, bridges, police, and water, and other infrastructure needs. Idaho is already seeing a downturn in state revenue, folks, and we face an extremely uncertain future with respect to the $6 billion that we count on every year from the federal government. This was not the time to punch a giant hole in our fiscal bucket, but that is what GOP politicians did this year. At the State House this year, we saw a supermajority that is struggling to govern. In fact, there were at least 25 budgets that we counted that could not have passed without Democratic support. But to distract from their failure to govern, they bring one ridiculous, divisive social issue bill after another. To all the old school Republicans out there who believe in fiscally conservative, responsible government, we Idaho Democrats are here for you. And I want to turn this over to my colleague, Senator Melissa Winthrop.
And I think it's unfortunate. I think the House just went into session, not affording us the same grace to speak with you, so I don't know what's going to happen to my House friends here. But you know, we're 15 Democrats and 105 member legislature. And I think we do a pretty good job of standing up for Idaho values against extremism that's infected and eroded our government. We value well-reasoned, common sense approaches, and we welcome anyone who is well-reasoned, common sense to join us to help us change the makeup of this legislature. Just this week, one of my Republican colleagues said from the floor, and I quote, "The more government tries to control things, the more chaos it creates." Ironically, that's exactly what's happening in this session, from no rules in JFAC, the committee I'm a member of, to poorly written bills that are being passed and creating confusion and chaos in our communities. Whether you're a Democrat or not, we can all agree that Idahoans do deserve better. And we need to restore balance and reason to this legislature. We are determined to shine a light on things and fight for all families, for all of our freedoms, and for fairness. So despite the odds, we did make a difference this session here in Idaho. We created consistent job duties for coroners, provided definitions and standards, and increased consistency across the state. I was very honored to work with the coroners and Representative Pickett, even in a bipartisan effort this year, to really work on restoring some things with the coroners and increasing public safety. We led, Representative Brooke Green is in the back, she led the effort to make 3D mammograms more accessible by requiring insurance to cover this life-saving imaging. We established an interim committee on housing. Senator Robbie did that to study the land use and make recommendations on addressing our housing crisis. Built on our work from last year to improve crisis holds for people with dementia and Alzheimer's when they're struggling, so they don't have to be taken to jail, but they could get medical care. And we fought for Idaho's most vulnerable. After working with stakeholders last summer, we continued to improve a bill to keep kids out of Airbnbs. We worked with providers to increase processes and improve them in residential treatment. We extended foster care for age 21 to 23 so young adults have a better shot at stability. And through our work on committees, we minimized some of the damage and even helped some of the most dangerous bills from becoming law. In my committee, we protected Idaho's blood supply by stopping the government from banning donations based on vaccination status. We salvaged as many budgets, far more, I guess my colleagues suggested, I think 20, including walking out from JFAC. When the other side was in such dysfunction, we had to break quorum to actually stop the killing of budgets to protect and safeguard our state agencies. We did eke out a modest wage increase for hardworking state employees. The governor recommended 5%, and we fought for weeks about that, which is unfortunate for our state employees. We blocked forced Bible reading. We blocked full Medicaid repeal. We stopped the prosecution of women. We saw a bill introduced that would charge women with murder for an abortion. We defended the ballot initiative process, and we kept guns out of schools one more time. So while Democrats fought for child care, housing, food security, for vulnerable populations, and a stable fiscal plan, the majority party was busy interfering with local business, local government, and personal choices. They've left our schools underfunded, our communities vulnerable, and they ignore you, their constituents, when you engage in democracy. The chaos and gridlock we're seeing this session is the natural result of extreme ideology driven by deep-pocket special interests overtaking the values of Idahoans, just everyday Idahoans. We deserve better, and it's time to balance the legislature in order to balance our budgets and protect Idahoans, young and old. And with that, we would take questions.
You mentioned affordable housing as an issue that's very important to Idahoans. We're seeing a lot of growth here, and this session we saw a camping ban law. So what is the path forward with affordable housing for now?
Yeah, you know, it's so unfortunate that one of the priorities that we see Idahoans have and talking about regularly is housing. And the $15 million, just a meager little bit, was denied right out. And I asked why. It was because we had to make way for tax cuts, revenue reductions. So now, at least Senator Robbie did pass a bill to create an interim committee to study land use and to look at and bring stakeholders together from business, from government, from all of our communities to see what can we do to address the housing shortage. And hopefully we'll see more investment there, because that's really where Idahoans need it. We're struggling.
Yeah. Thankfully, there was a kind of a dangerous pincer maneuver being set up there for a while, where there was the banning on sleeping outdoors or sleeping in your car. Then they cut the money for affordable housing, and then they tried to bring a bill that would have effectively shut down all the homeless shelters in any city limits across the state. So I don't know what their plan was for homeless people. Just banning homelessness is not going to get anybody a roof over their head, particularly when they were simultaneously shutting down every outlet for addressing homelessness. Thankfully, that one bill about shutting down all the homeless shelters did fail.
Yeah.
Any questions? Yeah.
Go, Kyle.
So, on a couple of controversial bills, on the child sex abuse death penalty bill and on the ivermectin deregulation bill, it seemed like there was division in your caucus about on votes. Excuse me. Can you speak to why your caucus wasn't united on one front on those bills?
I'll address that first. I think, with the death penalty issue, and I think probably all issues, you'll see that Democrats have a big tent. We want to think critically, and we value solid thinking and determination as we think about those things. We don't have just a solid flag in the sand, don't get off of it. And I think it's important that we do think critically, and we do what's best for all Idahoans, and we don't just whip people into shape.
Yeah, and I would say that none of those issues really cut to the heart of what it is to be an Idaho Democrat. We are here for equal opportunity for all, to protect freedoms, et cetera. And we don't whip people or necessarily all see these kind of niche issues in precisely the same way. But I don't know that any of those really cut to the heart of supporting public education and healthcare access to all, et cetera, kind of the core tent poles of what makes us Democrats.
Well, building off of what Kyle mentioned, I mean, you had a few votes earlier in the session, especially the personal income tax cuts that you had 2 or 3 members of your own caucus vote for. You had a member of your caucus on the Senate Education Committee vote for, one of the private school subsidy bills. I mean, those are core issues that the Democratic Party throughout the state has repeatedly hammered on that they will not budge from, yet we saw a movement towards that this year. How do you explain that?
Well, I think it's very interesting in that people are trying to accomplish all the same things, but sometimes people have different modes of getting there. And I think, there were various pressures being put on from leadership that if certain things were to be accomplished in the educational arena, they were putting a lot of heat on our folks to accommodate certain things, and it was clearly going to be a party line vote.
Other questions?
Senator Winchell, you talked about the issues you saw in JPAC this year. Where do you see JPAC going next year?
Oh. Well, I served on JFAC when I was in the House for 4 years, and this was my first return back, and it's not even the same committee. This past week, I mumbled under my breath after we had taken I don't know how many recesses to figure out what rules we were operating by. I said, all we need to see now is a juggling bear coming out the door with a unicycle. It felt like a circus, quite frankly, and it's unfortunate. I think, JFAC was a once well-reasoned, well-respected, dignified group that took its business seriously. And we didn't see it as an adversarial job to wreck government. We saw it as a deep responsibility to govern and to figure out how we were really going to fund the priorities that we have in education and health and et cetera, right? And I was shocked to see most of the members voting consistently just on a stand, an ideologic stand. And there was a predominant attitude of cut instead of really thoughtfully think about what is needed and how we could be efficient. I saw more venom and vinegar than any partnership or cooperation, and I think that's problematic. And I think our state employees suffered because of it. We saw fighting over, just giving them what they're due as far as wages. They have to put food on the table and feed their families. And we've seen across all state agencies when they came there, it's hard to keep people, it's hard to keep them motivated, they can't retain and they can't recruit because they're not paying enough. And the state jobs go over to the county or the city or the private sector. And I think that's really problematic for our state. So I'm not sure where it's going, but I would hope it would come to a head. You saw some of my colleagues there say, hey, we have to settle on rules. Rules make it predictable, fair, and transparent. And without those, we're just operating on what a few people at the top think we should do, and that's not really what people out there sent us to do, right? We all have a place to make decisions here. Yeah.
Thank you.
You can tell I feel pretty passionately about that thing.
Well, with the, sorry, it piggies off that question. With the maintenance enhancement budget process that we've been doing the last couple of years, I think this year we saw a lot of those enhancement budgets struggle, even relatively small ones.
Sure.
Do you see agencies maybe getting caught in some of these, some people are gonna vote against everyone that has full FTP or federal funds, which is a lot of them. How do you see that affecting kind of how these programs run, and do you think next year that's gonna continue to be
I think, I heard Elena behind you.
Oh, I just wanted to make sure that you all got the handout on the education cuts, because I think that's kind of illustrative of the point that Senator Winthrop was about to get to. But we saw hemorrhaging across all budgets and an inability for these agencies to adequately conduct their work, I think. But I'm going to let Senator Winthrop,
Yeah.
who's on JFAC, talk more about that, but I wanted to make sure you all had those handouts.
Yes, good. I think when I heard we were going to this new process to create a maintenance budget, which we would call bare bones budget, and then have these enhancement bills. Budget is like a car engine. You have all the parts together, they work together, and when you're examining all the needs of a state agency, you want to see it all in one place. And by dissecting it, it makes it confusing to follow. You'll hear people on the floor, I don't know what this maintenance budget means, I can't find things. And I think, honestly, that has decreased transparency, and it's caused more chaos and confusion. And what is allowed with the enhancement budget is, and these are just basic things that the department might need to replace things that are broken or outdated, or maybe there's a new initiative, right? And they're not huge, giant, established programs, new programs all the time. But what it's given the opportunity for the legislature is to pick them off one by one. And so they can say, well, we've done our constitutional obligation, we've gotten the bare bones done, and if we don't get that one passed, so be it. And I think that's what we're seeing is happening, is people aren't really taking seriously the entirety of the department and its needs, and they're just kind of letting a little bit go. And you probably saw people with the attitude, if there's federal funds, we're not taking it. If it's over 1.7%, we're not taking it. Instead of seeing what are the true needs of the agency, as well as, hey, where does this all fit in with inflation and per capita growth? Because people aren't even considering that.
And I think in the end, a lot of the effect is to be penny wise and pound foolish. So we saw heading into the session that the state is looking at almost a 20% turnover rate per year, and that it is costing us, I think, $301 million a year in recruitment and retraining costs, that we are constantly having to turn over our personnel because we don't pay them enough to keep our skilled, trained people. And I think that problem is only going to get worse. So while these people are patting themselves on the back for shaving off $1 million here and there, it's going to cost us $300 million plus in recruitment and retraining costs, as we have to replace all the people that we can't hire. And I think we saw that in other ways. For example, the workforce training piece, where they cut the $15 million, but at the end of the day, that's losing us $15 million in matching private funds, and it's going to lose us more down the road in terms of lost revenue from increased wages that we would have from having a more skilled workforce. I think this failure to invest is ultimately going to cost us far more than what they think they're saving.
Hey, Atlanta, just to give you a heads up, the speaker's going to move forward 2:45 sharp.
Oh, okay. What time is it? Go ahead.
2:46.
Okay. Want to ask you both about higher education. So on the one hand, we did see the budget cuts to Boise State and U of I. On the other hand, one survived intact, and that's probably going to have more of an impact on enrollment and budgets for the 4-year schools.
Right.
Assess the session with regard to higher education.
Well, it's a good question, Kevin, but here's the thing, is the launch program is providing the scholarships for the students to get there. The governor had some good initiatives to build out seats and training and capacity for once they get there. We have waiting lists of 200, 300 in some of the healthcare professions, construction management, engineering, right? And so the governor said, hey, let's make sure we can also make sure once we get the students there, we can educate them. And the legislature cut it. So I think higher education, especially, Boise State and U of I got cut another $2 million again each. They cut the capacity building for the workforce, those in-demand careers. I don't think higher education is faring too well. That's my assessment.
Yeah, and I think they also cut the funds that was needed to build up the workforce behind the workforce. They cut the funds that were intended to hire the faculty that would have actually allowed the launch kids to go through. So I think they have somewhat undermined the success of the program, although we're thankful the program remains in place.
Right.
What are your thoughts about Bernie Sanders coming to Nampa? Who do you hope comes out to the rally?
Well, I don't know if I'll be able to get there. I think it's always great when people become energized and when a light is shone on the disasters that are befalling us right now. I don't know if anybody's checked their 401k in the last couple of days. It's not pretty. I spent much of last weekend out at the VA protesting with our veterans on the deep cuts that are being made there and the hemorrhaging of necessary services for our veterans and so many others. I think sometimes people are very busy. Lots of people in Idaho are working multiple jobs, and it takes a lot to make them really aware of what's going on. And I think this is a time when it's critically aware that people know what's going on. It's certainly in their federal government and very much at the state level as well. I'm glad that there's going to be a publicity event so that people understand what's going on in Washington, D.C. and how it's going to affect their lives.
Other questions?
I think we can have Senator Waitrose stay and wrap it up if you need to get to the House floor.
Yeah.
Like you do.
Yeah, I do. But one thing I wanted to just highlight before I head back down to the floor, we talked about some of the things that pulled highest and what Idahoans wanted. Certainly one of the things that they most wanted was something to address our healthcare crisis and our women's healthcare crisis in particular. We are 50th in the nation in physicians per capita. I did not think things could get worse, but our supermajority GOP legislators, I think, did manage to make things worse for the state of healthcare access in Idaho. They brought multiple attacks on Medicaid expansion, signaling to any future physician that might think about coming to this state that their prospects of getting paid are on thin ice. They brought multiple attacks on WWAMI, which is the most successful program that we have ever had to bring trained physicians into the state. They killed the rural incentive program for doctors to go to rural and underserved areas. Just across the board, I think they worked overtime to make this, if possible, an even more hostile place for physicians to practice. So at this point, I think it is going to be in the hands of the people. I think that ballot initiative is the only realistic path forward. And with that, I apologize. I'm going to leave you in the able hands of Senator Wintrow because I think we're back on the floor.
I just want to say one very quick thing. I think it's absolutely outrageous that that our portion of this press conference is being cut short when the Speaker of Control has the gavel and he can wait an extra few minutes for us to finish answering your questions and instead of trying to shut us up and shut this down early. This is an abuse of power, and quite frankly, it's really inappropriate. But we have to go down on the floor now to vote on things. So, people should know what's going on inside this building, because he could just easily wait another 5 or 10 minutes and let you folks have an opportunity to ask all the questions you want of all of us here. Thank you.
Well, any other questions? I want to offer one thing on that budget question again, because since I'm back on the budget committee, I asked one of the budget analysts to give me some information, because all we hear about is these bloated budgets and our spending's out of control. We got to keep tightening the belt to the point we can't see our belly button, is what I say. But I asked recently, I said, hey, I want you to tell me, give me a chart, and I have it here if you want it. For the last 20 years, I want you to put down how the budget has grown over the last 20 years. And I want you to include population growth and inflation. And when you look at per capita and inflation adjustment over the last 20 years, the year-over-year growth is only 1.5%. And so basically when people keep saying our budget is going out of control like this, it's really this. And that's really kind of troubling when you think of the amount of population growth we've had and the amount of needs that we have. That's a pretty slim diet. And so I challenge anyone that says that our government is bloated. We've been running on empty for a long time, and it is really harming the services that Idahoans get, whether it's from Parks and Rec or Fish and Game or our bridges and roads or our schools. That's what's being affected. So I think that's a pretty pretty telling data point. Anything else? Feeling good? Gosh, you guys, I'm shocked. Well, thank you. Thanks for covering everything this session too, and really working hard. I know it's tough. You guys had a success on a bill too, didn't you? A shield for the, yeah, that's great. Good job, you guys.
No new earrings.
No new